Again, welcome everyone to this town hall meeting for the high school. This presentation will include topics such as next year's class schedule, expectations around attendance, homework and grading, as well as information related to other topics that have come up over the year. This presentation will be followed by a guided question and answer session. If you have any questions, please submit them using the question and answer function in the toolbar below.
Good evening, everybody. First, I want to say thank you for attending. This is the first of several of our educationally themed webinars informing of next year's virtual program. This is for the high school. And in subsequent days, we'll be offering virtual seminars about the middle school program and the elementary program. I wish to thank all of you who sent your questions in advance. We have them queued up. Again, we will answer those at the end of the presentation. Without further ado, let me introduce your high school principal, Mike Johnson, and he'll start the presentation. Thank you.
Welcome to everybody. I want to thank you for the questions that you sent ahead of time. Some of those questions came in before we were working on the presentation, so they have been incorporated into the presentation there, so you should be able to find some of the answers in there. Questions that came in afterward, we will set up at the end to answer some of those questions, but thank you again for sending those. Looking forward to tonight to talking with you. Miss being able to see students and parents in the morning drop-off, so it's kind of nice to be able to reconnect with you. So I hope you find the information in the presentation tonight useful in regards to where we're at and where we're going. And with that, I think we will go ahead and start with our presentation. Thank you. Good evening, and welcome to the high school presentation tonight. Tonight we'll spend some time talking about our learning model that we've been utilizing during these very unique circumstances that we're in. We'll spend some time talking about the virtual model or the distance learning model that we've used over the past few months, as well as we'll spend some time talking about the model we'll be looking at next year if we do need to go virtual again. We've learned along the way in the past few months, and we've taken what we've learned to improve our model even this year, but definitely to improve it if we do need to utilize it next year. Before we start talking about the models, I do want to spend a little time giving you some history as to how we've gotten to the point in our model where we're at. It was just about 3 months ago that we started in this process. And, school closure happened in March, and we thought, well, maybe this might just be for a short-term amount of time, or we hoped at least it would. And of course, that changed, and this became more of a long-term model than a short-term model. We started right away in something called an asynchronous model, which means a non-live model. It was a model where our teachers would spend a great deal of time planning and prepping and would prepare videos where the instruction was embedded in those videos, and students were able then to come online at certain times and view those videos, get the instruction. Then they were able to work on lessons that the teachers were providing. But this was a non-live model. We were very fortunate that we were already a school that was utilizing bring your own device. So our students already had computers. They were already utilizing something called Google Classroom a lot in our normal situation. So when we transferred over or moved into this distance learning model, there were some things already set up that made it very helpful for us and for the students. But the school closure was extended, of course, as we know, and it had us looking at ways to modify the model. It was good that we started with asynchronous, but it was within a short amount of time that we saw some adjustments needed to be made. And how we made those adjustments was based upon survey results that were put out. And within the first week of us working within this asynchronous model, we had started our first survey and utilized that information to improve it. We've had since then over 15 surveys that we've used, and we've appreciated the information that's come from those surveys because they've helped us keep what is working well but modify those areas that needed improvement. Now, I'm talking about the academics in this regard, but we also, as we went to this model, needed to realize and recognize that there are social and emotional needs of our students as well. And so I have to give a lot of credit to our counseling department, to Mr. Matthew Johnson, who developed his processes to stay in touch with these students that were struggling before we went into the learning model, this distance learning model. And we wanted to make sure that they were doing well as things were occurring. And even though we went to the virtual learning model, issues and things that were occurring before it didn't disappear. And so as we've moved through this process, we've also had to keep that in mind too, that academics are important, but we also have the social and emotional needs of our students to keep an eye on as well. Just to give you a brief overview of the models we were utilizing, I mentioned asynchronous, which is non-live. And each of these models has its pros and cons that I'll talk about briefly. And in the asynchronous model, we have the pros of it provides great flexibility, and it allowed students to kind of pick their own times as to when they would view the instruction, as to when they would complete the work. This was a good model to start with because in the beginning, there were so many things that families were wrestling with to get started. And our teachers too included in that. And so this gave great flexibility at that time for the students to pick the times when they were doing the instruction. Students would review these videos sometimes multiple times. Maybe they didn't catch it in the first time they watched it. They were able to come back and view it again and pull out that information that was important. This is also something that's been interesting we've been studying because we've seen some students who didn't do so well or were struggling, I should say, academically before we went to a virtual model. And now in this virtual sense, in this asynchronous type model, we're seeing them actually do quite well. And we think part of that is because they're able to view the instruction multiple times if they like, and get the information in there. So it really works to their own kind of pace of how they would want to view these things. Also, this model definitely gives a lot more self-paced possibilities to the students so they can pick when exactly they're going to work on the assignments, view the videos, and work within kind of their schedule. What are those optimal times? This definitely helped us in the beginning too because of the technological issues that were starting to happen. You know, everyone at home was getting online. Parents were getting online for work. Students were getting online for school. And sometimes the bandwidth was limited. And so in this system, if the internet goes down or the power goes out, students could come back online and review those videos and get that instruction. Some cons with this, though, this model were that some students do struggle initiating their own work and activity, self-initiating it. And we did see some students that were starting to get overwhelmed because they were struggling in the time management. And sometimes things would get delayed all the way to the end of when they were due, and the student would be overwhelmed with trying to get all this work done and sometimes wouldn't be able to complete it. So that was one of the things we noted early, and it came up in the surveys as well. The other con that came out as well is that in an asynchronous model, there's not live interaction with the teacher, and students definitely wanted more of that time to be talking with their teacher, and teachers wanted more time with their students, and then students just wanted to be able to see other students as this went longer and longer. They wanted that ability to be working within a class with other students. And so that was a limitation that was seen in this model that we've changed as we've moved along, and definitely have changed for next year for going to a virtual learning model. The other model that we've been working within is the synchronous model, and this is a more live model. It's a model where you have a set daily structure of live classes. And in this, you'll see the teacher and the students together in more live sessions. Students are able to see other students and like I said before, feel more as a part of a community, more part of a school. The teacher can also spend more time monitoring in real-time fashion how their students are doing, and hopefully help them quicker And if they're going off track, catch them early and help them out in the lessons that they're learning. The cons that we saw with this model as we implemented it were that it did increase the screen time, the amount of time a student was in front of the computer, because they're spending time for live instruction. Then there still would be things online, either video recordings that the teacher had done to supplement the learning, and then there's time to do the work as well. And so it did increase the amount of time a student is in front of the computer. Internet and power outages during live instruction, they happened sometimes. And the student then missed that instruction if it was only done during the live session. Most of the time we're able to work through that because a teacher may have more than one class period when they do that course subject. And so a student would then be referred to go to another class period and be able to pick up the live instruction. But that is one of the areas that we still even struggle with now, as sometimes the teacher's internet may not be working up to its optimal ways, and then sometimes the students as well. Some students did struggle a little bit behaviorally as we came back together, and I think that was just a natural situation of they've been kind of home just to themselves mainly, not seeing other students, not getting together, and then all of a sudden we bring them together in this virtual setting. And sometimes those behaviors that were happening, before we were in a virtual setting, came back in the virtual side. But really they've been minimal, and the students, I think, really appreciate the time to be able to work with the teacher, work with each other. And so they've self-regulated themselves better than I think we anticipated as we moved into the situation. Also, in this model, one of the things that was early on we struggled with was students had kind of already evolved into nocturnal creatures, meaning up at night, working, but sleeping mostly during the day. And so when we went to this live structured instructional times, then students had to get up in the mornings and participate in the lessons. And for some of them, it was a struggle. But we've made some modifications in our schedule where the same periods don't start off in the morning every day, so that if a student is still struggling in that area, they're not missing a huge amount of content. So you've seen the two models that we've been working within. How we made the changes within them, how we tried to keep what was working well, and how we tried to modify what needed improvement was through our survey results that I talked about before. And we definitely utilize these in a big way. They guide us. They help us to see what areas we can assist the students in, and in what areas they may be struggling. And so the survey you see here was one of our first ones early on when we were in the asynchronous, non-live type model. And so we wanted to ask students, well, how much homework have you had, or work are you having to put in this model? And we saw early on that this was becoming overwhelming in the amount of work that students were stating they were having to do. In our one part of our survey here, you see they were saying over 5 hours a night, and that's way more than what should have been occurring. So it had us looking into what is causing that, and it was a series of factors. Some of it was, as we went right into this model, everyone was very concerned about content. Are they going to get enough content in this time period, especially with AP exams coming down the road? And so I think a lot of information was given to the student, a lot of work was given to them in this hopes of making sure we're covering everything. And we've pulled back from that. And instead of trying to make sure we cover all the content, we focus on really those areas that the student does need to learn. The standards is what we utilize, of course, and so focusing more on the skills than necessarily fully on how much content we're covering. We also asked students what do they like about the program, and they stated to us they like the flexibility of certain parts of it. And so we've tried to keep those as we've been changing the model and been going through it. We've also asked for suggestions. Our students are users of this model, and so they've given us some ideas of some things that we could do and change and modify. And one of them was postings seemed to be coming all on certain days, and the student was getting overwhelmed by trying to get these all done. So we've spread those out and improved the process in there, and teachers have set times that they can do, or set times that their classes may post to help the situation. Here's an example of another survey that we did, and this survey was one that went out to you, the parents, to give us some feedback on what you're seeing. This one happened a little bit down the road while we were in our virtual model, because as we were making changes, we wanted to see what are the results of those changes. So we appreciate parents getting back to us and letting us know what they were seeing. And it looked like the changes were working. From what parents were stating, definitely in the early parts of this survey, we saw that they felt students were more engaged, more participating in the program after we made the changes. We also wanted to know how much information the parents knew, and if we're getting all the information out to you or you're able to access it. And so we saw there was a little bit of a breakdown in things when we asked about the schedule, which our students were required to attend these class periods between the periods of a time period of 8:30 in the morning to 2:30 in the afternoon. Did parents know that students needed to attend those? And not all knew. So that led us to believe we needed to improve our information that we're getting out to you. And a lot of that's been with our high school bulletin, getting that to you in a more set time at the beginning of the week so that you knew what the students were expected to be doing. We also asked how the students learned best, and you provided some information about how your student does their learning and how we can help them the best in that area. And then one of our last questions that you see here was, what are you seeing with the work? Because when we saw in the beginning there was a lot of work having to be done, had that improved? And from our results at this time, it showed that it had. We were getting more to the area that we would expect in this situation. But thank you very much for the information you provided. It's helped us and guided us as we've been on this kind of new path of developing this virtual program. So just a quick overview of what we focus on. I'll spend a little more time and give some more details as we actually get into what it looks like for next year. But our focus areas from what we've learned along this path we've been on is that we need to keep the focus areas of maintaining a consistent class schedule that mimics or will definitely complement, I would say, a in-person model, because eventually we'll get back to school and be together again. And so we want to make an easy transition as we move to that. Also, we've seen, we need to increase teacher-student interaction time during the class periods. And you'll see more information about that a little bit later on here in the presentation. Give students still that flexibility that I asked for. We've done that with actually how work can be turned in, and it gives them some flexibility there because things are happening in these households, and we do see that they need some ability to kind of pick as to when they may be able best to work on things. More online resources, because a teacher is not always available, like at school where a student can just pop in the classroom. So we've upped the number of online resources that a student can access. We're still maintaining office hours to give that individual assistance. We see that students do need that time to work one-on-one with the teacher, maybe after the instruction's been done or after class especially. And so you'll see every day that's been built in. Keeping the set limits on homework was a big part too as well, so that it doesn't become too overwhelming for the students. So you'll see each course does have its own limits as the amount of homework that occur after the instruction is done during class. We also see we need to increase the feedback too to you and to the students. Some of it we can do in the systems we have, like Google Classroom and RenWeb. RenWeb is what we use for grades primarily. We also use it for a progress report that comes out every Friday so that you can see how things are done. We did catch some issues early on where teachers were giving feedback through Google Classroom. Students knew how they were doing, but as for the grades getting into RenWeb, they were getting delayed. And some of that happened because we're being flexible with the late work. And the late work sometimes became quite a task for the teacher to get done and then get the grades all in. And so in our model for next year, we will work on the late work side of things so that it doesn't disrupt being able to get the grades in on time. And establishing a good start time, you'll also see, has been a focus area here so that it matches a little bit better to the circadian or what we call the sleep schedules of our students. what you see here is the schedule that we will utilize next year if we are going virtual. And it's not far from the schedule we have now because we've been developing that and modifying it. So we've gotten a good model in place, and we didn't want to change it completely. But there were some areas that needed some modification. So we're still staying within our 7-period cycle of classes. And you'll notice on Monday it's 1, 2, 3, 4, periods 1, 2, 3, and 4. Tuesday, 5, 6, and 7. And then at the end of the day on Tuesday, a little bit more office hour or work time for the students. This will be very similar to the schedule that they'll have when they return back to school, so we wanted to keep that. We've also, on Wednesdays, we have our specials, and we've given them more time so they can break their classes into smaller sizes and work individually. For example, music will have the ability to break it down, and the teacher can work with those students more in an individualized, or at least in a smaller group setting. On Thursday and Friday, you see in the schedule, we're back to our 7-period cycle, but we've rotated the classes a little bit, so starting with 4th period first. And this is to adjust to some of those students that do struggle getting there on time in the morning to start the classes. The big part, though, in the schedule that you may have seen here is that, sorry, I'll come back to it, is that our start time is 9:30 in the morning, and that's to match a little bit better to their sleep cycle. Also to help out families who have siblings in, say, middle school, elementary, and high school. It must be quite a challenge trying to get everybody started at the same time. So we're starting a little bit later, and hopefully this helps families be able to kind of bring each one of their students online according to which division they're at and not have to do it all at the same time. So I talked about the focus areas we've been aiming at this year, and it's what's led us to then comments about the schedule that we would be utilizing for next year, the model. And in that, we will increase the live instruction time. We're looking at, our target is about 30 to 40 minutes of a 60-minute period. So it might break down something very similar to this, where 20 minutes is instruction from the teacher, 20 minutes is guided work while the student is working on things. The teacher's there doing a virtual, what I call virtual walk around. And then 20 minutes where the student can work independently, but the teacher is there to provide assistance if they need. So this is what will probably be the typical situation that a class would look like. Attendance will count, just like it always has. We'll continue with that. Schedule, as I mentioned, does have a late start in there. And hopefully helps our students do a little bit better, that do better as the day goes on. We'll keep the rotating schedule part of it. We've also added something in addition that I didn't mention just prior, and that is after each class, there's a half-hour break or what we'll call additional work time. So the student can still take a break, but then with the time remaining, work on what came up from the class and hopefully finish most of the work that they have by the time they get to the end of the day. Specials teachers will have some flexibility to help out with their classes as well on Wednesdays. And we did need to schedule those on Wednesdays because we do share those teachers with the middle school. And the middle school, I believe, will be working on, their specials will be on Fridays. So part of it is those shared resources that we have with our specials teachers. And office hours will continue. And at the end of every school day, just like we've had before we went virtual, and we'll continue along those lines. We'll keep focusing and looking for better ways to increase feedback to you, to the parents, and to the students, because we don't get to see you on a daily basis. So we need to have better systems to get you the information about how your student is doing. And keeping those established maximum workload or homework amounts so that it doesn't become too overwhelming for the students. And then the last part with this to remember is that we will be utilizing our standard grades. I know some other models that we've seen around the world, they've gone to pass-fail, and there's some good reasons why they may have chosen that, of course. But for us, we're staying with our standard grading system, but being very flexible in other areas. We're concerned if we do go to a pass-fail that this could cause some issues when our students are applying to colleges. And so we're staying within the grading system, but we will make modifications in other areas to assist the students to help them out. And the last part before we go to our questions is just a reminder, there are a lot of wonderful folks here to help you out. And so this slide shows you the names of some of those folks. Don't hesitate if you have questions or concerns to reach out to any of us. We're definitely here to help. Our virtual door, so to speak, is always open to all of you. So, please feel free to utilize us as a resource. It's not easy, this model that we're in. It has its challenges, but definitely you should be able to find somebody who's available who can help and assist you with any of your needs. I think with that, I'll finish the presentation here for now, and I believe we are going to start heading into some specific questions, some questions that came in prior to the presentation, as well as some questions that may have just derived even after the presentation here that we'll be discussing. So thank you very much for letting me have some time here to talk about our models, and look forward now to answering some questions.
Okay, at this point, we will move into the question and answer session. So we have had a few questions that have come in so far, and we'll be sharing them as we go through. There has been a couple questions that have been answered, though, regarding the clarity of the presentation. This is probably due to internet connectivity. We are recording this presentation, and we'll share it out afterwards, and the recording will be clear. And ideally, we will attach the slides along with the presentation, so you can read them at your leisure as well.
Well, very good. It sounds like we're experiencing some of the things I just talked about, sometimes with the internet going down and issues that come up with the technology in here. So yeah, hopefully with the recording, if you didn't catch some of the earlier part of the presentation, you can catch it in the recording. We do have some questions that came through, and I tried to kind of prioritize them a little bit, or meaning the trends, as I saw certain questions come up more than once. Definitely added those into answering things here. I'll tell you, one of the biggest questions that comes up is about our activities in regards to like intercollegial, ASA run. What's going to happen with those in the coming year? And we're sticking with some of our dates already, especially if they're longer into next year, with a possibility that we can continue in that regard. But some things I know we're already planning to do later, maybe into the second semester, being the ASA run, for example. We'll continue on that path. As things get extended, if they do, then of course we will adjust in our dates for those big activities. I know our juniors and our seniors are very interested in what's going to happen with those events, because they're very involved in them. But we do have alternate dates already lined out in case we need to go to these situations. So we'll definitely keep you up to date on any changes that occur with it. Our plans are to continue with them as long as we can within the structure of what the government and the Ministry of Health allows for us. They could occur, but be limited in certain ways too as well. So we have to keep that in mind for these activities. One of our other big questions was all the work covered this semester? We went to virtual, and are the students, are they getting a limited curriculum? Are they not getting all the content? And here you see some of the questions up on your screen. One of the nice things that we have is that typically our second semester is a very short one. I was amazed last year in my first year how quickly that went, and how fast in things. And so a lot of things, our teachers who've been with us for a little bit have known to upload things as well early in the semester. So there wasn't as much necessarily to cover in there, but teachers also focused on, I would say, more on the skills. Maybe the content wasn't all covered like we normally could do. So there was a prioritizing of the skills and the standards that they needed to learn. So teachers, as we went longer through this, were able to break those down a little bit better. And so maybe we didn't catch all the content, and maybe we might not in first semester in there, but focusing on what they really need to move on to the next level has occurred in there. Let me go ahead and have Mr. Coman go ahead and explain a little bit that answer in Spanish as well. I apologize for running on there a little bit long.
Buenas tardes a todos. Se han compilado algunas preguntas que ustedes amablemente remitieron. Algunas de ellas ya fueron contestadas durante la presentación. Entendemos lo mismo, estamos en servicio si fuera necesario expandir alguna de ellas. Y vamos a estas en particular que estuvo mencionando Mr. Johnson. Con respecto a la primera, las actividades de 12º grado, como el intercolegial, ¿habrá cambio de fechas? Él se refirió a que inicialmente en el calendario nosotros nos mantenemos con las fechas inicialmente pactadas, concertadas. Sin embargo, por supuesto, vamos a depender de lo que se determina a nivel de decretos presidenciales o de resoluciones ministeriales, ya sea el Ministerio de Salud o el Ministerio de Educación principalmente. Con respecto a la pregunta número 2, ¿cómo balancear el nivel de trabajo, ya que algunas semanas tienen una carga particular y otras menos? Mr. Johnson estaba refiriendo a que este semestre es particularmente interesante debido a que es más corto y más intenso que el semestre anterior. Por eso también puede dar a veces esa señal de desbalance entre un semestre y otro. Please continue, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, and just with number 2 there that you're talking about as well, we have some things in assessment calendars so that we can try to not have too many assessments occur at one point. It becomes tough for the student. But we've also been trying to adjust that. And here, as we've gotten to the end of this semester, I think you'll see that it's improved. In the beginning, I do admit it was tough. And I think there were some weeks when students had lots and lots of work they were trying to accomplish. And then maybe the next week, all of a sudden it dropped down. And so trying to keep kind of an equilibrium is a good thing in there. And now that we've been in this model, I think we understand better how to spread things out. If you would mind additional.
Somos conscientes de que al principio, cuando se entró a este modelo asincrónico, a distancia, que con el tiempo fue tornando más sincrónico, hubo algunas dificultades con respecto a la carga de trabajo, lo reconocemos. Ahora bien, la percepción es que con el paso del tiempo y el uso del calendario de tareas para que no haya sobrecarga excesiva en algunas sesiones o en algunos días en particular, la cosa se ha ido equilibrando. La experiencia, tenemos los datos de encuesta de los chicos, se ha ido de alguna manera equilibrando.
Our question number 4 here, how does a teacher know if the students are covering the content, and what do they do if they feel the student has not covered that content? This is something we wrestle with whether we're in virtual or whether we're in person in our model all the time. What a teacher typically will utilize is the assessments that they've built in that are in alignment with the standards. And so as a student will take an assessment, if they don't do well on that, for example, and they're maybe not meeting the standard in there, we do have a system of reassessment where the student is able to retake, again, with additional things that they do to assure that they're getting the standard or the best that we can. So there are ways. Sometimes a teacher will to move later on. They'll see the students, maybe if it's a large number of them have missed an area, they'll reteach that later on as well.
Con respecto a la reducción de currículum de la pregunta 3, ¿verdad? Si se va a utilizar un porcentaje de tiempo grande para cubrir el contenido, en este caso virtual, y si hay limitaciones de currículum. El abordaje que se da de esta realidad es más bien con respecto a la competencia o la habilidad que propiamente al contenido. Es decir, que ir a lo crucial, a lo central, vinculado más a la habilidad que al contenido. Y con respecto a la pregunta 4, ¿cómo el profesor sabrá si los estudiantes están desarrollando el contenido? Y si no lo desarrollan, ¿qué se hará? Bueno, algo de lo ya dicho, el currículum va más por lo crucial hoy por hoy y por la habilidad que propiamente por el contenido. Y cuando los estudiantes no llegan a lo pretendido por la materia, por la disciplina, por el profesor, existe la política de reevaluación, existe la extensión y flexibilización de plazos también, para que en comunicación con el profesor los chicos puedan ir recuperando aún aquello que queda pretérito y pendiente de ser satisfecho.
Thank you. Our last question here, and the questions that came ahead of time with the presentation, was in regards to elective courses. And I believe these questions started to come because we've just started to send out the course selection where students start to pick what electives they may take, or what specials is what we call them. And some of those electives and specials were not in there. And so it's led some parents, some students to inquire as to what occurs with it. Within any school, and I've seen this other places that I've been, our teachers are a resource, and we try to utilize them to the best capacity, to the most of the capacity that we can. And so sometimes electives do drop off for a period of time because maybe the numbers are not high enough, and that teacher could be utilized in another situation. Of course, we are in a different situation with budgeting now, with things that have occurred in here, and so some decisions needed to be made in regarding to what electives and specials that we may have. It's very common. I've seen it in every school I've been in, that we need to look and see the number of students that take each course. Sometimes it even happens in a core class if it's maybe not necessarily required in there, and it may disappear for a semester and then come back the next semester or the next year. So there is kind of what we call an ebb and flow sometimes, especially within the electives that we see. And sometimes a new set of electives come around the corner too as well. So it's a changing situation with electives.
Con respecto a la pregunta 5, ¿qué pasará con los cursos electivos que no estarán disponibles en el primer semestre del próximo año lectivo? Bueno, esa es una pregunta que tiene que ver un poco también con cuándo volvemos a clases virtuales y también con presupuesto. A veces cuando se reduce el tamaño del colegio por situaciones como la que se está viviendo actualmente, no es raro que haya reducción por un tiempo determinado, por ejemplo un semestre, por ejemplo un cuarto, de determinadas materias electivas. No obstante, por supuesto, estaremos atentos al regreso, al análisis de cuáles son esas materias electivas, el número de estudiantes que estaban en ellas, e inclusive la posibilidad de incluir otras que estén en sintonía con las intenciones o los intereses de la población estudiantil.
Those were the set of questions that came in before our presentation, or right, I should say, maybe right about that time. And so they've been included here, and then some were included in the presentation as well. Some questions have now arrived in as we've been presenting here, tonight. And one of the first questions that has come through is, have we considered the possibility of kind of what I'd say a hybrid schedule, where half of it is the students would be able to come maybe from 8 to 12 in the morning, and then maybe they go online after that side of things. So is that a possibility? And I think, and maybe Mr. Russo will jump in on this one as well, that I think we're looking at all possibilities within the safety, and health guidelines that come through the Ministry of Health. But I think everyone's goal is to try to get back together as soon as we can, but we have to always be aware of what are the safety precautions that need to be taken, what are the regulations that we have to work within.
And to add to what Mr. Johnson says, fundamentally, we're preparing for all scenarios, whether we're virtual, presential, or hybrid. And if you've been following the news, schools around the world, in the US or over in Asia, they've been kind of experimenting with certain models. We're collecting that information and finding out what works and what doesn't. So we anticipate we may end up having to do some sort of hybrid, and we'll prepare multiple scenarios for it.
Con respecto a la primera pregunta, que tiene que ver con un horario híbrido, presencial y virtual, en síntesis se puede decir que se están analizando las experiencias que se están llevando a lo largo y ancho del globo, para que si esa presencialidad se acerca o se hace próxima por disposición gubernamental, estamos preparados nosotros para llevarlo adelante. Por supuesto, vamos a depender de lo que se disponga a nivel de decreto presidencial o resoluciones ministeriales. No obstante, como dijo el señor Russo, están analizando las experiencias de los colegios, escuelas que están regresando a lo largo y ancho del mundo para tener incorporadas las experiencias que están resultando exitosas y poder replicarlas dada la necesidad o las circunstancias si eso se genera aquí.
Okay, and our next question that's come through tonight is in regards to the interactiveness within the classes, meaning in that live model that I was discussing, what are the possibilities, what are we looking at into next year, into that situation? And of course, as I mentioned in the presentation, the goal is to increase that, and we've been steadily increasing as we've gone through. I can't say we've been 100% this year in always these interactive situations every period that's occurred in that situation. But next year, you know, the focus changes because we'll be hoping that it's only a semester we would be in this online virtual learning situation, and we need to get the students ready to be back together. I think this year we knew that at the end would come the break, but next year's a different situation of we'll be coming back together, and we need to be as close as we can. It can't be exactly like it, but as close as we can to the model when everybody's back together. So I described a little bit about what a typical class may look like, you know, broken up into thirds, with first part being interactive and or being that part with instruction, teacher working with the students in the middle in kind of a guided instruction situation there. So that's the model you should see it shifting more to when we start next year.
Y con respecto al próximo año, con respecto a lo sincrónico o asincrónico, como él había resumido el señor Johnson, empezamos más con carácter asincrónico, tornándose a un modelo medio híbrido de sincronicidad y asincronicidad. Para el próximo semestre, como describió, trataremos de aproximarnos lo más posible a lo sincrónico. Es decir, como señaló, esos 30 o 40 minutos iniciales de interacción de los estudiantes con el maestro y luego el trabajo de los chicos en conexión con el estudiante, ya sea por vía electrónica o por video, para tratar de replicar lo más que se pueda, aún por medios electrónicos, lo que significa la presencialidad en el colegio.
All right, and our next question that's come through tonight is in regards to grades. It's been noticed by myself, by the teachers too, and of course with the students and the parents, that there have been delays in getting the scores or grades into RenWeb. We've looked into that, and the situation in regards to that is we've been very flexible in the late work this year. And in a typical situation, you know, late work can only come into a certain point in time, and then we're past. But this year we're in different circumstances, and so we've wanted to be as flexible as we could in receiving that late work and making sure the student is, as one of the questions was, covering the content. That is always our goal, to make sure that they're able to get the skills, you know, that they need there and get as much content involved in that as well. So we've had some issues with that because the teacher is trying to get through the grading of the late work, and then it becomes difficult to get everything into, you know, RenWeb in a timely fashion sometimes. And then the second part of that we realized too, as we looked into it a little more, is we use Google Classroom, and students were getting the feedback through the Google Classroom and seeing how they were doing, but those grades needed to move over into RenWeb in a quicker fashion. And so I know even today, as I was doing some checks on grades and seeing how things are updated, we made great progress in this week, but it has been a difficult situation, and it is definitely a target area for next year to speed that up and make sure grades are getting in there in a timely fashion.
En relación a la consulta sobre el posteo actualizado de calificaciones, en efecto se ha constatado, sobre todo al principio, pero también a lo largo del proceso, que ha habido algo de demora en esa actualización. Ahora, como Classroom es una buena plataforma para interacción dialógica entre los profesores y los estudiantes. Esa fue una buena manera que se mantengan en comunicación. Sin embargo, esas notas o lo dialogado allí o lo señalado allí o lo corregido ahí tiene que traducirse o transferirse a RANWeb para que las notas en efecto estén actualizadas. Creemos que se ha dado un progreso satisfactorio en esa línea. Aún hoy detectamos algunas dificultades o contratiempos y se le está dando seguimiento a aquello para generar respuestas más satisfactorias. Es importante también tener en cuenta que este semestre es completamente singular debido a las circunstancias de carácter global, lo que hizo que nuestros plazos de recepción de tareas sean mucho más flexibles que los habituales en otras circunstancias. Eso también ha significado un desafío en la actualización de notas porque ha originado mucha más comunicación, ha originado mucho más trabajo para corregir y por ende luego para actualizar en la plataforma que informa sobre calificaciones, que es propiamente RANWeb.
And we had a couple questions in regard to our schedule that's up there. Why does it rotate? Why is it not the same every day? And why couldn't we keep it as a static kind of schedule in there? And the reason we do have to rotate in it is to allow extra time within the periods. If we tried to do every period every day, they would become very short class periods and not enough time for the students to really learn the material and cover things in that regard. But it also does change at other times. And why is it always not the same? Let's say class that starts in the morning, like a period 1. And before I came here, it was one of the things that I learned about with the other teachers is that there is a struggle. Maybe it's a traffic situation or other reasons why students don't always make it to school on time in the morning. And if you were a teacher of that first period every morning, then you really had a hard time with attendance with your students, and it became very difficult in that regard. So that's why our system does rotate to give extra time, and also to allow for sometimes the mornings are kind of a later start due to a series of reasons why students may not be able to make it to school on time.
Yendo a la pregunta referida a por qué la naturaleza de un horario rotativo, la razón es que si se hubieran tenido todas las clases en el mismo día, los periodos de clase hubieran sido muy cortos y no hubiera favorecido el aprendizaje. ¿Por qué la rotación propiamente dicha? Porque una de las cosas que llegó a la atención del señor Johnson apenas arribado aquí es que por razones de tráfico o por dificultades de puntualidad, los chicos de la primera hora del primer bloque no siempre se presentaban ahora. Si la clase se mantuviera estática, esa clase en particular recibiría un impacto bastante más grande y desproporcionado a las demás. Entonces, para ir ofreciendo oportunidades de formación vinculadas a puntualidad del principio de la mañana y demás momentos del día, es que se ha analizado la validez de un horario rotativo.
Right. And then another question which did attach to an answer I had given just a little bit earlier about live instruction, but this one specifically asks, what if a teacher is not in Paraguay? Will live instruction still occur, or will, if that teacher is out of the country or away with things, will it be just recorded for that teacher? And the answer to that is the focus is, and what our setup is for next year is live instruction. So no matter where they may be, the teachers will be conducting live instruction. And we've seen that now. We have teachers that are in different places and they're still able to do it. Time differences get to be, a challenge in that side of it, but there will be, that live instruction. And Mr. Russo may add some more to this.
So as you know, there's a significant number of our staff that are currently in the United States or elsewhere in the world delivering the virtual instruction. Depending on what the ministry or the government says and the status of the pandemic, that'll inform when we would ask those teachers to come back. So that fundamentally, the first opportunity that we have where it's safe and the frontiers are open, we will ask those teachers to come back and to be here to deliver that instruction on campus. And then hopefully from there, we can do some sort of hybrid or phased instruction. Again, that all is driven by the status of the pandemic, what the government and the local ministry says.
Y yendo a la pregunta que tiene que ver con los profesores que están en el extranjero, eh, la expectativa ahora es que las clases tengan naturaleza más sincrónica, es decir, que sean en tiempo real, de coincidencia maestro-alumnos. Eso será refrendado y si cabe reforzado en el próximo semestre, no importa el uso horario en que se encuentren los maestros. Y lo que señaló en su intervención el señor Russo es que apenas, por supuesto, el monitoreo de la situación de la pandemia global continúa y, por supuesto, el análisis de lo que gubernamentalmente está permitido, apenas haya chance y las fronteras se abran, vamos a apuntar a tener a los profesores que se encuentran en el extranjero aquí, inclusive si fuera posible pensar en un plan híbrido virtual presencial como parte del recomienzo de las actividades académicas.
All right. And I think, but someone can remind me if we're running out of time, but one more question here, and actually there's about 3 of them that come into this area, is that what happens with those classes that are hands-on? You know, in this live or this on the line model, how do you do a class like AP Art or how do you do PE? And I'll tell you, they are challenging, but the teachers who are doing these classes have really had to utilize some creative methods. If it's possible, if it's a 1-semester course, then of course we would look to move it into a semester when we're back together. So it may not be offered when we're doing online, if it's a special or an elective. But the other ones, we found ways this year, and I've been very impressed with what the teachers have been able to come up with in doing it. And so we would continue along that path, because we want to make sure in certain cases, especially some of our AP elective type ones like AP Art, that we can work with them. And so we've seen the teachers come up with some great methods to do it. And then once we're back together, the things that are essential to be done in a hands-on right there in the classroom, then we can move them to that side. So it causes some shifting with the teacher of how they do things, but they've been able to come up with some pretty great and creative ways to do this.
En respuesta a la consulta sobre aquellas disciplinas que requieren una ejecución práctica, por ejemplo, AP Art, se estuvo buscando mecanismos para hacer lo mejor posible dadas las circunstancias actuales. Se mencionó el señor Johnson que algunos profesores han demostrado una peculiar habilidad para ir avanzando en ese sentido. Por supuesto, no va a ser lo mismo por contacto virtual que presencial, sin embargo, se entiende que se han dado pasos en esa línea. Y lo que puedo sumar yo es que lo que ustedes quizás ya conozcan, ¿verdad? El Ministerio de Educación está analizando que haya un regreso de los bachilleratos que requieran mucha ejecución práctica, que son los técnicos. Eso, si se produce, si se dan las garantías de salud y se generan los documentos que facilitan, nos da las chances también para nosotros de pensar en lo dicho antes, en un modelo híbrido de transición que tenga ya algo de presencialidad y que favorezca la ejecución práctica de los trabajos.
And we have another question in regards to applications to universities. What are the times when would those be due? And to be honest, that's something best because it's very individualized according to which university you are attending or hoping to attend. So it's best to you can work through our counseling department. They definitely know a lot of that information, or directly with those universities to find out when their their due dates are for things. The universities, I have to say, they're getting as creative as the schools are, like the high school, in regards to how they are, taking applications, what their deadlines are. They're being flexible on some of those things. And then in the same question with some questions about SATs, those standardized tests. What about those? Because some of those have been canceled recently. They are all looking, the organizers of those standardized tests, they are looking for other options to help out, because we're not the only school in this situation. And just like what happened with AP exams, they did an excellent job of coming up with another option for our students to be able to take the exams. And so we anticipate the same would happen with ACT and SAT type tests.
And a good source for that information will be the bulletin. And there's a lot of, I want to say, misinformation or maybe perhaps contradicting information out on the web as you maybe do Google searches. If in doubt, reach out to us and we will give you the answer that is most correct. And if we don't know, we'll let you know and we'll find out what that answer is.
And I think the last one, oh, go ahead, sorry, I jumped in.
Con respecto a las evaluaciones, por ejemplo, SAT, quizá ya hayan escuchado que han sido canceladas, pospuestas por este año. Cuando tengamos más información al respecto será compartida. Y en lo tocante a estudios universitarios de los estudiantes que se están graduando, las informaciones que habrán visto se señalan, algunas van en una línea, otras en otra, son contradictorias o conflictivas. En caso de duda, no, por favor, no permanezcan en esa situación, contacten con nosotros en particular, con la oficina de consejería, y se le dará la respuesta precisa si se conoce, y si se desconoce, se buscará hallar la respuesta.
Okay. And I think our last question here, but our panelists will remind me if I missed any questions, is that what about exams? And actually, that's a big question right now as our students are getting close to the time that they would take exams. This year, we're doing them in a different way. They've actually become optional. And they're optional if a student is passing the class. If they're failing, they will be required to take the exam so we can ensure that they've acquired the information and the standards. But this year they have become optional. And when a student does take them, so if they are passing and they take the exam, they actually don't work against them. They, if they can demonstrate even more knowledge that they've learned this year through what their grade is on the exam, they can actually increase what is their semester grade. And that was something we did this year too. Instead of breaking it into quarters, or 2 quarters, we did a long-running semester grade, because students were needing time to catch up, and if we would have closed things too early, it would have put them in a difficult situation. So we've had a running total, and then exams are coming here at the end, and actually very perfect timing. Tomorrow I send out to the students the schedule for the final exams, if they're going to opt to take those. And then what these exams will look like. Some of them are projects, by the way, too, so they're not always a typical kind of test that they would take.
Yendo a la pregunta muy pertinente de cómo se realizarán los exámenes en estas circunstancias absolutamente peculiares, los alumnos están siendo comunicados de que los que reprueban tendrán una evaluación, o los que decidan tomarlo. Es decir, se le va a dar la chance a los que tienen una nota mínima satisfecha de que puedan tomarlo o no. Y si lo toman, va a ser para demostrar aprendizaje o para mejorar su promedio. Varias de las evaluaciones no tendrán en efecto la forma del examen, sino la forma del proyecto, pensando en darles más chance todavía a los estudiantes a que hagan algo de progresión en el tiempo, que tengan más chance de demostrar el conocimiento y que puedan recibir retroalimentación de parte de sus profesores para reencauzar lo que sea necesario.
And just to kind of add in that, and other things fit into it, although it's been a tough situation this year, and it's not been what we would say necessarily the optimal situation, we have been able to try some things and experiment with some things, because it's a different situation. And some of them are showing great results, and then we'll try to continue and use those throughout the year, next year, whether we're together or online. But also with these exams, we're trying something new. And it's actually been something that's been kind of questioned before about finals, and do they need to stay in the same regard that they've been in the past? And so this was an opportunity we took to say, let's try something different. And if we're seeing this is a good set of results, because right now we're seeing students are actually working up a little bit better. They want to avoid having to take an exam. So that's a nice benefit in there. And then if it takes a little bit of the pressure off as to, well, if I take it, it's not going to hurt my grade, it only help, we might find better results than we've had in the past. So we're definitely utilizing our current situation to see if we can improve things and experiment with some things that we may carry on later on. So that's a nice benefit of where we've been at.
Esta situación desafiante también ha representado una oportunidad con respecto a las evaluaciones. Ser más creativos, que no sea solo un examen, que sea un proyecto, que tenga distintas partes. Y en algunos casos vemos cómo los estudiantes están respondiendo satisfactoriamente a ese cambio de paradigma, ¿verdad? Y bueno, hasta ahora estamos por los análisis de las calificaciones y la comunicación con los chicos, inclusive el diálogo que ellos generan, viendo que se generan oportunidades de una evaluación más diversa que le permita a los estudiantes demostrar lo aprendido de maneras más amplias.
All right, and one important question that came up about community service, and that was actually asked very early on with our seniors because they were concerned about what would happen in graduation. But what happens in regards to community service and the amount of hours that a student has to acquire when we all of a sudden aren't together, and the school usually helps organize and run those. And so for this year with seniors, we have reduced the amount that they needed to graduate. They lost a semester, which is essentially 10 community service hours. And so our seniors would be able to graduate with less hours than what other classes have had. It is something we're looking at and reviewing because it didn't just impact our seniors, of course. It impacted the other classes and the juniors who are just close to coming back up as seniors. Will we need to do something similar with them or with other grades? So we will be reviewing that to see what happens if we do need to make some changes. But we have been allowing community service during this time, during the pandemic, and it's been interesting to see how creative the students have come up with ways to help the community. And that's been a nice byproduct, so to speak, of our situation, of what they're doing and how they want to help. They know this is a time to really try to help others and provide service to others.
En lo tocante al servicio comunitario, por supuesto que esta situación ha obligado a repensar el requisito de la exigencia de horas determinadas, que ha generado una reducción de ellas ante la imposibilidad del servicio efectivo, por un lado. Y por otro, también aquellos estudiantes que no solo seniors, sino demás estudiantes que deben llevar adelante el service learning, el servicio comunitario, han buscado, y también algunos patrocinadores, maneras creativas de seguir llevando adelante ese servicio con algunos resultados que son decididamente encomiables. Y por supuesto el análisis de esas horas de servicio y de ese programa en particular proseguirá el próximo semestre, el próximo año lectivo.
All right, I think we've come to the close of our questions and with time right now. So I'll hand things over to Mr. Sheldon here, and I just want to thank you tonight. It's been nice being able to share some information. I know it seemed a little one-sided, although electronically I've been able to have you, communicate with us here and tell us your questions. But like I finished the presentation, virtual door is always open to help, and don't hesitate. If you see an issue that we need to try to rectify, please be in contact, and we'll work our best to see if we can resolve it. But everybody's still available. We're just instead of being in person, you can meet us. It just may be through emails and those type of communications. So please feel free to contact us if you need.
Muchas gracias por sus respuestas, muchas gracias por su participación, gracias por ayudar a dar pasos, a trabajar juntos. Sabemos que no todas las respuestas han sido contestadas, algunas que sí, por supuesto, pueden generar preguntas consecuentes. Sepan, lo dice el señor Johnson, seguramente lo dice el señor Russo, el señor Sheldon, lo mismo, nuestras puertas están abiertas. Si encuentran algo que nos pueden señalar para ayudarnos a seguir dando paso y acompañarle de manera más efectiva a nuestros chicos, nuestras puertas electrónicas están abiertas.
And if I can just say a couple words. Again, thank you for all of you for attending and submitting your questions. There are a few lingering questions that are coming in. Please submit them directly to Mr. Johnson, and we will get those answers respectively back to you as soon as possible. And what I want to say in general is the entire world is in this similar situation, trying to wrestle and figure out what virtual learning looks like. The good thing is our network, my network of colleagues across the world is strong, and we're constantly communicating with one another. What is working, what isn't. So it's kind of getting actual live feedback and tuning our program in real time to those advices or to that input of our colleagues. So what I want to say is we're not done with this. We'll continue to tighten and adapt the program, and we're following everybody around the world and finding out what they're doing in order to give the best possible program.
Las conexiones con los demás colegios e instituciones educativas a nivel internacional son amplias y son fuertes. Dice el señor Russo que se están en contacto permanente para anotar las buenas experiencias, para anotar las buenas prácticas, cómo se resuelven algunos de los desafíos. Eso nos permite estar bien informados para tomar decisiones en ese sentido y mantenernos al día. Y lo que también señaló es si tienen más preguntas, si hay dudas que perduran, por favor, escríbanle al señor Johnson con las consultas, las preguntas, y él se intentará comunicarse con ustedes lo antes posible para seguir trabajando juntos en esta línea.
We've reached the end of the presentation. Thank you everyone for participating and joining us. We will have a couple more the rest of this week. Tomorrow you can join us at 6 o'clock for lower elementary presentation, as well as 7 o'clock. And then we'll have a middle school presentation at 6 o'clock on Thursday. You can see the entire schedule that Mr. Russo has sent out, along with the links for each of the presentations. Remember, this presentation will be recorded and translated and shared with you afterwards. Have a great evening.